Our present lesson is on indirect statement. So this is a continuation of our previous lesson regarding infinitive verbs, because in the indirect statement we will be using the infinitive verb. So aside from the usual usage of the infinitive which we discussed last time, the complementary infinitive, we will now be studying another use of the infinitive verb in a sentence. In the previous lesson, we discussed about complex sentences. And as you all know, complex sentences have at least one main clause and one subordinate clause. So in connection with our present study, the indirect statement is a noun clause. So generally, in English grammar, there are three different kinds of subordinate clauses. We have noun clauses, adjective clauses, and adverbial clauses. So this is previous lesson, we have studied the relative clause, which is an example of an adjective clause. So this time, we shall be studying the indirect statement, which is a noun clause. And we will have to study its unique characteristics. So what is an indirect statement? An indirect statement or indirect discourse in some grammar books is a noun clause, as we have already mentioned, that is used to report direct statements indirectly, meaning to say not directly in quotation marks. And this happens when the verb of the main clause is a verb of saying and similar words. So let us take a look at the difference between English and Latin indirect statement or indirect discourse. So in English, the indirect statement is generally introduced by that, which connects the indirect statement to the main clause. For example, you have here, he said that Peter loves the church. So that Peter loves the church is an indirect statement. An example, the boy believes that Jesus is Lord. That Jesus is Lord is an indirect statement introduced by that. And I thought that she will sing. That she will sing is the indirect statement. Now, when we go to the Latin language, there is no corresponding word for the English that to connect the indirect statement with the main clause. Rather, the Romans use the infinitive verb with a subject accusative. So this is the unique characteristic of the noun clause. So generally, when we have a subject, we put the subject in the nominative case, and the verb, the final verb, generally in the relative clause, in the indicative mood. In the other subordinate clauses that we will study later on, the verb of the subordinate clause is placed or is put in the subjunctive mood. Here, in indirect statement, the verb used is the infinitive verb. So if we look at the English equivalent of the examples we have given in English, the first one, he said that Peter loves the church. He said, Dixit, that Peter loves the church, Petrum amare ecclesiam. So you will notice that the subject is in the accusative case, Petrum, while the verb is in the infinitive form, amare. And you have ecclesiam, the direct object. So Petrum amare ecclesiam is the indirect statement. And As to the basic sentence pattern, it is a subject, verb, or transitive verb, direct object, STVDO. The second example, the boy believes that Jesus is Lord. So, puer credit, the boy believes that Jesus is Lord. Jesum esse Dominum. Jesum is the subject of the indirect statement. And again, it is in the accusative case. And the verb to be esse is in the infinitive form. It is the infinitive of sum. Dominum here is the complement noun. So you have subject, linking verb, complement noun. And remember the rule of agreement, the complement noun agrees with the subject only in case. So Jesum, the subject of the indirect statement, is accusative. Therefore, the complement noun Dominum is also in the accusative case. Then, another example, I thought that she will sing, that she will sing. And here we have a future tense of the verb. So when it comes to Latin, I thought, potavi, that she will sing. Eam cantaturam esse. So the subject, she, is eam. Eam is the pronoun feminine accusative case, again, because the subject of the indirect statement is in the accusative. Will sing, future tense. Therefore, you will have to use the future active infinitive, cantaturam esse. And you should remember that this is a compound verb. Cantaturam, the future active participle, plus esse. Cantaturam must agree with the subject in number, gender, and case. Eam is feminine, cantaturam is feminine. Eam is singular, cantaturam is singular. Eam is accusative case, so cantaturam is also accusative case. So therefore, this is what we call as indirect statement. Reporting a direct statement indirectly before or after verbs of saying and similar verbs. So this is how you form or you construct the indirect statement using the verb infinitive and the subject accusative. So going back to the examples given in the previous page, Dixit Petrum amare ecclesiam. So Petrum is the subject, amare is the verb of the indirect statement in present infinitive active, and ecclesiam is the direct object. As we have said, the sentence pattern is subject, transitive verb, direct object. The second example, puer credit Jesum esse Dominum. So Jesum is the subject, esse is the infinitive verb, which is the verb of the sentence, or verb of the indirect statement, and Dominum is the complement noun. So the pattern is subject, linking verb, complement noun. And rule of agreement, the complement noun agrees with its subject only in case. Only in case. Jesum is accusative, Dominum must be in the accusative. In the third example, eam cantaturam esse. So eam is a pronoun, it is the subject in the accusative case, and it is feminine in gender. Cantaturam esse is the infinitive verb, future active infinitive form. And as I have already said, the future active participle cantaturam must agree with eam in number, gender, and case. Number, gender, and case. So that is These are the examples, and this should always remind you of the fact here. The subject is accusative, the verb is in the infinitive form. Okay, to summarize what we have discussed, you have to take note. Take note. There are three things here that you should take note. First, an indirect statement is possible only when the verb of the main clause is a verb of saying, knowing, thinking, and perceiving. So, not all verbs can introduce an indirect statement. And here below, you are given examples of verbs in Latin, very commonly used verbs in Latin, verbs that we have been using in the exercises or in the worksheets. Verbs of saying, example, dico, nego, nuncio, narro, scribo, doceo, ostendo, ait, respondeo, and demonstro. These are verbs of saying, the idea of saying. The knowing, scio, nescio, intellego, comprehendo, conosco. Verbs of thinking, credo, puto, spero, arbitro. Arbitro is a deponent verb. We will study that later, the form, these kinds of verbs. So, number 4, letter D, verbs of perceiving, audio, video, sentient, so verb of the senses. So, only these 4 kinds of verbs are able to introduce indirect statement in a sentence. So verbs of saying, verbs of knowing, verbs of thinking, verbs of perceiving. Second, the verb of the indirect statement is infinitive. So when you come across an infinitive verb in a sentence, do not jump to the conclusion that it is complementary infinitive. This is no longer the case in future exercises, in our future worksheets. You should be aware that the infinitive is also used as the verb of the indirect statement. And number 3, this is very unique. The subject of the indirect statement is in the accusative case. So accusative case and subject. So therefore, again, when you see a noun or pronoun in the accusative case, do not immediately jump to the conclusion, ay, direct object yan. Because it is accusative, direct object. No. So when you analyze the sentence, be very careful because this time an accusative case noun or pronoun can be a subject when there is an indirect statement. So these are the 3 important points that you should always remember. So when we come now to the analysis in the worksheets, if I ask you to analyze, for example, the verb, infinitive verb, of course, in the first column, you will say verb. In the second column, what is the function of this verb? You say verb of the indirect statement. Remember, because the verb is infinitive verb. I only ask you the tense, mood, or voice when we are discussing about a finite verb, a verb which has subject and person. Pag ang verb na sa infinitive form, ngunyan duwang simbag na ang posible. It is either the ordinary complementary infinitive or unity, subject of the indirect statement. So, and the second one, of course, the subject of the indirect statement. If it is a noun, you say noun. If it is pronoun, you say pronoun. And the function, simply subject. No need to say subject of the indirect statement. Just say subject. So, yan ang guideline for your worksheets. When I ask you to analyze a verb, an infinitive verb that is used as the subject of the indirect statement, and of a noun or a pronoun that is used as the subject of the indirect statement. So, yan ang function, verb of the indirect statement. The subject is simply the subject. No need to write of the indirect statement. So, thus far for the lesson on indirect statement.